Welcome to the Deep Dive. We've received a truly fascinating stack of sources from you, covering, well, everything from global sustainability efforts and climate science.
To pivotal moments in Indian history, yeah.
Exactly. And public health breakthroughs, the intricacies of governance. It's quite a mix.
It's a remarkable collection, truly. This deep dive should offer a pretty good shortcut to being well-informed across, a really diverse range of topics.
Giving you the essential context.
And those surprising insights you need to kind of connect the dots.
Our mission today is basically to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, those surprising facts, give you those aha moments without hopefully feeling too overwhelmed.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're kicking things off with a major development. India's historic achievement in the Global Sustainable Development Goals, or SDG, index.
Yes.
In 2025, India ranks 99th. That's its first ever entry into the top 100. Quite a leap.
It is indeed significant progress. India scored 67 out of 100, which is a notable jump from 109th in 2024.
And way up from 2017, too, right?
Oh, yeah. Steady improvement from 116th back then. And just for context, the SDG index itself, it's published annually by the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network.
Right, measuring performance across those 17 SDGs.
Exactly, on a 0 to 100 scale for each country.
So how does India stack up against its immediate neighbors?
Well, for comparison, Bhutan's at 74th, Nepal 85th, Sri Lanka 93rd.
Okay, so ahead of some, behind others.
Right. Bangladesh is at 114th and Pakistan at 140th.
And the global picture, you mentioned the top ranks.
Yes. Globally, the top three are Finland, Sweden, and Denmark. And what's really striking is that 19 out of the top 20 countries are European.
Wow, that's dominance.
It really is. But what's fascinating here about India isn't just that it improved, but how. The sources point to specific gains.
Like electricity access.
Exactly, SDG 7. And digital connectivity, internet, broadband under SDG 9, plus a significant reduction in child and neonatal mortality, which is SDG 3.
So foundational improvements having wider impacts.
Precisely. It shows how, basic infrastructure can act as a critical multiplier. But globally, it's not all good news. The sources also point to areas of regression worldwide. Things like rising obesity, declining press freedom, biodiversity loss, nitrogen management issues, and a persistent perception of corruption.
Okay, so a mixed bag globally. And what about the commitment side, the actual, drive to meet these goals?
Well, there's a strong call for global financial reform, lots of critique about the current system being biased towards richer countries,
Right.
and a push for fairer allocation of special drawing rights, SDRs.
Those IMF reserve assets.
Exactly. The idea is to get more of them to emerging and developing economies, the EMDs.
Makes sense. And who's seen as most committed?
According to the data here, Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago rank highest on multilateralism commitment.
Interesting. Not the big players necessarily.
No. And in fact, the United States is ranked lowest, 993rd, largely due to withdrawing from some SDG policies, apparently.
Wow. And among bigger economies.
Brazil leads the G20 countries at 25th, and Chile tops the OECD countries at 7th.
So this raises the big question, right? What are the core obstacles stopping us from hitting these SDGs by 2030?
Yeah, the sources list several systemic challenges. Things like fragmented governance, institutional weaknesses,
Okay.
insufficient financing, which links back to that economic inequality point, critical data gaps making effective policy hard.
And those trade-offs you hear about.
Yes, interconnected trade-offs. Progress on one SDG, like, say, agricultural expansion, might hinder another, like biodiversity.
Right.
Then there's climate change, obviously, environmental degradation, low public awareness, surprisingly.
We just don't know enough about the goals.
Seems to be a factor. And finally, a general weakening of multilateral cooperation.
Okay, quite a list. So given all that, what are the proposed strategies? How do we get past these hurdles?
Well, it's multifaceted, as you'd expect. Strengthening governance is key integrated policies. Decentralization.
And the money.
Mobilizing sustainable finance. That means innovative tools, tax reforms, and that global financial reform piece, like fairer SDR allocation.
Got it.
Then enhancing data systems, managing those trade-offs, using systems thinking, accelerating climate action with things like nature-based solutions and circular economy models, building public awareness through SDG literacy campaigns, and, crucially, revitalizing multilateralism's South-South cooperation, multi-stakeholder platforms.
a huge agenda.
Yeah.
It really highlights how systemic these challenges are.
Absolutely.
And, systemic challenges and governance crises aren't exactly new. Sometimes looking back helps. Which brings us to our next topic. The emergency in India, declared 50 years ago, June 25, 1975.
Yes, a really pivotal and difficult period lasted 21 months until 77.
And characterized by
A widespread suspension of civil liberties, pervasive press censorship, mass arrests. The sources say over 1.12 lakh people were detained under laws like MISA.
the Maintenance of Internal Security Act.
That's the one. And COFA POSA. And the Defense of India rules. Basically, preventive detention without trial for many.
So governance shifted dramatically.
Fundamentally, from parliamentary democracy to essentially rule by decree.
What was the backdrop to this? Why then?
Well, India was under immense pressure. Economic stress from the 71 war with Pakistan, the 73 global oil crisis, widespread droughts.
A perfect storm almost.
Pretty much. This fueled corruption concerns and growing public dissent. You had powerful student movements like Gujarat's Navnirman movement, Bihar protests.
Led by Jayaprakash Narayan, right? The JP.
Yes, under the banner of Sampurna Kranti, total revolution.
So massive unrest. But what was the final spark?
The immediate catalyst was judicial. On June 12, 1975, the Allahabad High Court found the Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi, guilty of electoral malpractice.
Wow.
That verdict just ignited national protests, fervent calls for her resignation, and that led President Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed to proclaim the emergency on June 25th.
Centralizing power, undermining federalism. And the emergency saw some major constitutional changes too, didn't it?
Right.
Altering the basic structure almost.
Absolutely. The most significant was the 42nd Amendment in 1976.
What did that do, specifically?
It drastically restricted judicial review. It empowered Parliament to amend the Constitution pretty much unilaterally.
Yeah.
And it shielded laws implementing directive principles from court scrutiny.
So weakening the judiciary's power significantly.
Hugely. And the judiciary itself was undermined directly. Pro-government judges were promoted. Justice H.R. Khanna, famous for his dissent on habeas corpus.
Arguing for basic rights even in an emergency.
Yes, he was superseded for Chief Justice. Then you had the 39th Amendment.
What did that add?
It protected the Prime Minister's election from court review, and it placed MISA, that detention law, beyond judicial scrutiny by putting it in the 9th schedule.
Effectively insulating these actions from legal challenge.
Exactly, making them untouchable, legally speaking.
That period sounds incredibly intense. So 50 years on, what are the enduring lessons for India's democracy today? What do we take away?
Well, the lessons are stark, really. The absolute imperative to safeguard civil liberties, even during crises.
Maybe especially during crisis.
Perhaps. Also, the need to recognize early warning signs of democratic backsliding. Things like the erosion of judicial autonomy, suppression of opposition, legal overreach. And critically, the ongoing need to strengthen checks and balances within the institutional architecture. It showed democracy's fragility, but also its potential resilience as it eventually ended.
It really underscores that democratic resilience isn't just about laws, it's about institutions and maybe public vigilance too.
Very much so. An active citizenry and a truly independent judiciary are crucial. Lessons India still reflects on today.
And speaking of democratic processes and integrity, let's pivot to a very current effort. Bihar's Special Intensive Voter Roll Revision. Proof of birth is now mandatory there for new voters.
Yes, this is happening ahead of their assembly elections. It's a significant undertaking because the last intensive revision was way back in 2003.
Wow, over 2 decades.
Right, so this new drive is specifically aimed at updating the rolls, tackling issues like urban migration, where people move and aren't re-registered, unreported deaths.
And potential illegal immigrants on the rolls.
That's another stated concern, yes. The whole effort is grounded in the Constitution, Article 324, and governed by election laws like the Representation of the People Act, 1950.
And the specific proof of birth requirements seem quite detailed.
They are. It's categorized by birth year, aligning with the Citizenship Act, 1955.
So for someone born before July 1st, 1987.
Their own date and place of birth proof is enough.
Okay. And between July 87 and December 2, 2004.
Proof of birth for either parent is needed.
And after December 2, 2004.
Proof of birth for both parents is mandatory. And this specifically applies to voters who weren't already on those 2003 rolls.
It really shows the depth of the verification they're aiming for. How's it being done on the ground?
Well, booth-level officers, BLOs, are doing door-to-door surveys. They distribute and collect pre-filled forms, along with the required supporting documents.
Is there an online option too?
Yes, online submission is possible via the SNet app and the Election Commission website. Then verification is done by electoral registration officers, EROs, under Section 23.
And if there's a dispute?
There are appeal provisions under Section 24 to the district magistrate or the chief electoral officer, so there's a process.
And I understand there are also updates to the EVM and VVPAT protocols, ensuring transparency there too.
Yes, this is a pretty important change. Previously, machines used for mock polls, the test runs before actual voting, sometimes had their data discarded, unless the victory margin was very narrow.
Okay.
Now, the rule is strict. All such machines must have their votes counted separately, and the mock votes have to be subtracted using certificates.
And if staff mess up, like forget to erase the mock data?
Strict action will be taken against polling staff if mock data isn't erased or if the VVPAT paper slips aren't removed properly. It's about ensuring absolute integrity of the count.
So what does this Bihar initiative signal more broadly for electoral integrity in India?
It likely signals an expansion towards a nationwide voter roll purification drive. It's a move to reinforce transparency, ensure legal compliance, and bolster electoral integrity.
Trying to balance inclusion with preventing fraud.
Exactly. Balancing inclusive voting rights with control over, illegal or fraudulent entries, a foundational aspect for any healthy democracy, really.
Absolutely. Foundational work.
Now let's shift focus again, this time to public health. We have a significant development regarding hemophilia A. What exactly is this condition?
Right. Hemophilia A is a genetic bleeding disorder. It's caused by a deficiency of a specific protein, clotting factor 8.
Which is needed for blood clots to form.
Precisely. So this deficiency impairs the body's ability to form clots, leading to prolonged bleeding, sometimes spontaneous bleeding.
And it's inherited.
Yes, it's inherited in an X-linked recessive pattern. Because the gene is on the X chromosome, it predominantly affects males. Females are usually carriers, sometimes with mild symptoms.
And the breakthrough mentioned in the sources. The National Institute of Immunohematology in India has indigenously developed a point-of-care test kit.
Point of care. So usable outside a lab.
Exactly. For early diagnosis of both hemophilia A and another condition, von Willebrand disease, VWD. This is huge for making diagnosis more affordable and accessible, especially in remote areas.
That is a big step. What are the typical symptoms people should be aware of for hemophilia A?
Well, the severity varies quite a bit. But common symptoms can include prolonged bleeding after minor things, like circumcision in infants, or from falls when toddlers start crawling or walking, or later in life after surgery or trauma. Internal bleeding is also a risk that can show up as joint pain and swelling, blood in urine or stool, frequent nosebleeds, spontaneous bruising.
Yeah, the main treatment.
Primarily factor replacement therapy. That involves intravenous infusion of concentrated factor VIII to basically restore the clotting function.
Okay. And you mentioned von Willebrand disease, VWD. How is that related or different?
VWD is another genetic bleeding disorder, yes, but it's caused by low levels or malfunction of a different protein, the von Willebrand factor.
Also crucial for clotting, though.
Yes. So while it's distinct from hemophilia A, they both affect clotting. VWD symptoms often include easy bruising, frequent nosebleeds, heavy periods in women, gum bleeding. Severe cases can also involve joint issues.
Is there a cure?
No cure for either, unfortunately. But symptoms can be managed effectively with treatment and lifestyle changes. And that's where that new diagnostic kit is so vital. Early diagnosis makes management much better.
It's amazing how diagnostics are improving. But not all health threats are genetic. Let's talk about an infectious one, Candida tropicalis.
Yeah.
Sounds exotic.
It does, doesn't it? Candida tropicalis is a species of yeast, part of the Candida genus. It can act as a pathogenic fungus in humans.
Particularly dangerous for some people.
Yes, especially for immunocompromised individuals. The sources note a worryingly high mortality rate, 55–60% in systemic infections.
And where does it normally live?
Surprisingly widespread habitats. Tropical and subtropical marine ecosystems, seawater, sediments, mangroves, fish intestines, algae, shrimps.
Wow. Not just hospitals, then.
No, but it's also found in non-marine environments like the human gut, on fruit surfaces, in soil, even processed foods.
So how does it typically spread and become infectious if it's kind of everywhere?
Often through what's called nosocomial means.
Hospital acquired.
Exactly. Spread through contact between healthcare workers and patients, contaminated surfaces, things like that. It becomes infectious when the body's normal balance of microbes, the microbiota, is disrupted.
Like by antibiotics.
Yes, antibiotics are a common trigger. or when blood sugar levels are high, like in diabetes. It mainly affects the skin, the gut, the female genitourinary tract, and it's particularly dangerous for neutropenic patients.
Those with low white blood cell counts.
Precisely. Their defenses are down.
Is treatment generally effective?
Common antifungal drugs like fluconazole and voriconazole are the standard treatment. However,
There's a catch.
there's an emerging concern. Recent research indicates that Candida tropicalis is developing resistance to these drugs, possibly due to chromosomal alteration.
Making treatment much harder.
Exactly. It complicates things significantly and poses a growing public health challenge.
From these microscopic health battles, let's shift scale dramatically to global diplomacy, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC. What's its significance?
Well, it's big. It's the second largest intergovernmental organization after the UN.
Really? How many members?
57 member states spanning 4 continents. It was formed back on September 25, 1969, after a summit in Rabat, Morocco.
And its main goals?
Core objectives include preserving Islamic values, safeguarding the sovereignty and independence of member states, promoting peace and security globally, and acting as the collective voice of the Muslim world on key issues, social, economic, political.
How is it structured? And where's it based? Does it manage to represent such a diverse group effectively?
Its highest body is the Islamic Summit Conference, the ISC, which meets every 3 years. Then there's the Council of Foreign Ministers, the CFM, meeting annually.
Okay.
The executive arm is the General Secretariat. Headquarters are in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Official languages are Arabic, English, and French.
And representing that diversity.
That's the challenge, isn't it? With 57 members having diverse, sometimes conflicting national interests, presenting a truly unified front can be, well, complex.
We saw a recent news item about the OIC in India. Some friction.
Yes, India recently criticized some OIC remarks, calling them unwarranted and alleging influence by Pakistan. India also reiterated concerns about Pakistan's alleged use of terrorism as statecraft. It just shows the ongoing diplomatic sensitivities.
Right. Okay. From global bodies, let's zoom right down to grassroots governance in India. The Training of Trainers program, TT. How does this connect?
It connects surprisingly well, actually. This program was launched by the Ministry of Panchayati Raj, part of the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav celebrations.
And its main goal?
Primarily, to enhance the financial autonomy of panchayats, the local village councils, helping them improve their ability to raise own source revenue, OSR.
So less dependence on higher government levels.
Exactly. It's implemented under the Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Abhiyan, RGSA, and they're collaborating with IIM Ahmedabad on it.
And what are the broader aims? You mentioned a connection to the SDGs.
Yes. It aims to build more robust and responsive panchayats, strengthening their financial and governance capacity right at the grassroots. This, in turn, helps ensure they can contribute effectively to achieving those sustainable development goals we talked about earlier.
So linking local capacity directly to global targets.
Precisely. And the revamped RGSA, which runs until 2026, now focuses specifically on capacity building for elected panchayat representatives.
Oh.
And interestingly, it even includes institutions in areas where panchayats don't constitutionally exist, making it inclusive across all states and union territories. It's quite a comprehensive approach to local empowerment.
Empowering local governance is definitely key. Now let's talk climate change again, but focus on a specific potential solution. Enhanced rock weathering, or ERW. What is that exactly?
Right, ERW. It's essentially a nature-based carbon removal technique. The idea is to accelerate the natural process where rocks weather and break down, capturing atmospheric Ki-Euro in the process.
How does it accelerate it?
It mimics and speeds up the natural reactions involving carbonic acid in rainwater dissolving rocks. This turns Ki-Euro into stable bicarbonates in water, which eventually can form limestone, locking the carbon away for a very long time.
And how does the science work in practice? What rocks do they use?
Typically, they use fast-weathering rocks like basalt. These are finely ground, think rock dust to dramatically increase the surface area.
More surface area means faster reaction.
Exactly. These fine particles interact with carbonic acid in soil and water, effectively locking away Ki-Euro in stable mineral forms. There's also a co-benefit.
Yep.
It can increase soil alkalinity, which can actually be good for crop growth and overall soil health in some cases.
And you mentioned this isn't just theory, it's actually being done.
Yes, that's what's interesting. ERW projects are apparently emerging across Europe, North America, Latin America, Asia. It's even gaining traction with tech firms, airlines, fast fashion companies looking for carbon credits.
So its effectiveness depends on
Several factors. The specific rock type used, the particle size, local climate, moisture, and temperature, our key soil composition, land management practices. Basalt is often preferred because it's abundant and relatively cheap, often a byproduct of quarrying.
But there have to be downsides, right? Potential risks. Geoengineering always seems to have them.
That's a crucial point the sources raise. While it promises climate benefits like any geoengineering, there are potential environmental risks that need very careful consideration and management.
Such as? What are the main concerns?
The key ones are heavy metal contamination. Some fast-weathering rocks, certain basalts included, can contain toxic heavy metals like nickel, chromium, cadmium.
Which could leach into soil and water.
Exactly. There's also the risk of messing up soil chemistry if it's not applied correctly. Water contamination is a related risk. Dust and particulate emissions from grinding the rock.
Affecting air quality and health.
Potentially, yes. Disrupting biodiversity in sensitive ecosystems. And finally, the energy and emissions trade-off.
Meaning?
If the mining, transporting, and grinding processes aren't powered by clean energy, you could end up generating significant emissions yourself, undermining the carbon removal goal.
So is there a consensus on whether the benefits outweigh these risks? Or is it still very much under debate?
The sources suggest the debate is definitely ongoing. Careful management is absolutely paramount. The potential is there, but the risks are real.
Okay, so what are the mitigation measures proposed? How do you manage those risks?
Well, strategies involve very careful rock selection, choosing types with low toxic metal content, regulated application rates based on the specific soil type, robust monitoring programs for soil, water, and crop health. And, crucially, using renewable energy for the crushing and transport to minimize that associated carbon footprint.
It sounds promising but complex. Connecting this to the bigger climate picture, the sources also mentioned findings from the State of the Climate in Asia 2024 report from the WMO.
Yes, the World Meteorological Organization. This is their 5th annual report on Asia's climate, done with various agencies. It tracks key indicators, impacts, risks.
And the 2024 report highlights
some pretty alarming trends, frankly. 2024 was the warmest year on record in Asia. And get this, every single year from 2015 to 2024 ranked among the 10 hottest years globally.
Wow, a clear, accelerating trend.
Unmistakable.
And what about the oceans around Asia?
Asia's sea surface temperatures also hit an all-time high. And the rate of warming in Asia's surrounding seas over the last decade is nearly double the global average.
Double? That's huge.
It is. And sea level rise on both the Pacific and Indian Ocean sides of Asia has also exceeded global averages. That means increased flood risk for coastal areas, which are densely populated.
And you mentioned marine heat waves.
Yes. Strong to extreme marine heat waves across most Asian oceans, particularly severe in the northern Indian Ocean and near Japan, the Yellow Sea, East China Sea, apparently the largest extent of marine heat waves recorded since 1993.
And extreme weather events on land.
The report documented 4 major cyclones, Rimal, Dana, Fengal in the Bay of Bengal, Asna in the Arabian Sea, plus extreme temperatures like 49 degrees Celsius recorded in Saudi Arabia's Makkah region in June 2024.
So putting it all together,
these shifts, surface temps, glacier melt, sea level rise, they have profound implications for economies, ecosystems, and societies right across Asia.
From global climate shifts, let's turn inward again to social reform within India, specifically to someone whose legacy continues to shape the nation, Sri Narayana Guru. His work seems like a powerful counterpoint to some of the divisions and challenges we've touched on.
Absolutely. Sri Narayana Guru is a fascinating figure. Born August 20, 1856, into an Azava family in Kerala, a community facing significant caste discrimination at the time. He passed away September 20th, 1928.
And he was
a saint, a philosopher, a spiritual leader, and a relentless social reformer. He fought tirelessly against caste discrimination, promoting spiritual unity and social justice.
How did he prepare for this role?
He studied Sanskrit, yoga, meditation, lived as a hermit for 8 years seeking spiritual enlightenment. He's affectionately known as Gurudevan.
What was the core of his philosophy? That famous phrase.
Or Jafi, or Umatham, or Daivam Manushanu.
Which translates to?
One caste, one religion, one God for mankind. A radical message of unity for his time.
And how did he put this into practice, that Arivapuram movement?
Yes, that was pivotal. In 1888, he consecrated an idol of Shiva at Arivapuram. This was incredibly bold because traditionally only upper castes could perform such consecrations or even enter temples freely.
So a direct challenge to the orthodoxy.
a direct challenge, and it sparked a wave of similar movements demanding temple entry rights and social empowerment across Kerala and beyond.
And he didn't just protest, he built institutions too, right?
Indeed. He established over 40 temples, ashrams, and schools, crucially offering free education to children from all castes, which was revolutionary.
Sivagiri Matha.
He founded Sivagiri Matha New Varkala in 1904, a key spiritual and social center. And his institutional legacy includes the Srinarayana Dharmaparipalana Yogam, the SNDP Yogam.
Formed in 1903.
Yes, under the Indian Companies Act, interestingly. Guru was its permanent chairman. The SNDP focused on education, social equality, and political representation specifically for the Izava community. His disciple, the poet Kumaran Asan, was its general secretary.
And he was involved in the Vaikom Satyagraha as well.
Yes. Guru supported that landmark protest against untouchability and caste barriers in Kerala, fighting for the right of marginalized communities to use public roads near temples.
He also started the Sivagiri pilgrimage.
Initiated it in 1924, yes, promoting principles like cleanliness, education, agriculture, trade, and devotion. It continues today as Sivagiri Tirthadanam.
It's really striking how his deep philosophical ideas were translated into such concrete, practical social action.
Absolutely. And his writings, Advaita Deepika, Atmavilasam, Devadasakam, Brahmavidya Panchakam, they reflect his profound Vedantic philosophy and this idea of spiritual egalitarianism.
His legacy clearly endures.
Deeply. His birth and death anniversaries are public holidays in Kerala and other states. He's revered as one of India's most influential social reformers whose ideas on unity and equality still resonate powerfully.
Okay, for our final deep dive, let's look at something quite specific. A financial scheme. The Sabka Vishwa's Legacy Dispute Resolution Scheme, 2019 SVLDRS.
Right, SVLDRS. This was launched in the Union Budget of 2019. It was operational for a fairly short window, September 1st to December 31st, 2019.
And its main purpose was?
Primarily to resolve old pending disputes related to indirect taxes that were abolished and subsumed under GST. We're talking service tax, central excise.
And others.
Yes, 26 other indirect tax laws that basically disappeared with GST's arrival. So it was about clearing the backlog.
What were the core objectives? What did it offer people?
It aimed to encourage voluntary disclosure of these pending tax disputes. It allowed individuals or companies to declare unpaid tax dues from that old regime and settle them under the scheme's rules.
And the incentive. Why would they do it?
A key incentive was immunity. Immunity from penalties, interest, and importantly, prosecution once they complied.
And was there financial relief too?
Yes, significant relief on the tax amount itself, ranging from 40% to 70% of the tax dues, depending on the specifics of the case. Voluntary disclosures generally got a bit less relief than cases already under litigation.
A pragmatic way to clear old cases before GST fully took hold.
Exactly.
So the scheme is closed now. What's the latest legal development?
The Customs, Excise, and Service Tax Appellate Tribunal, SUSTAT, specifically the New Delhi bench, recently issued a significant ruling.
Which said?
It ruled that revenue proceedings cannot be initiated once a discharge certificate has been issued under SVLDRS.
Meaning, once you settled under the scheme and got the certificate?
The case is closed, done, final. The tax authorities can't come back later and try to reopen it or start new proceedings on that same matter.
So it confirms the scheme's promise of finality.
Precisely. It provides certainty for those who participated.
This ruling provides that clear finality. But what does a scheme like SVLDRS, and this ruling reinforcing it, tell us about the broader picture of tax policy and dispute resolution in India? Is it just about clearing old stuff, or does it signal something more?
I think it signals a bit of both, actually. Yes, SVLDRS was very specifically designed for those legacy issues to clear a massive backlog before GST really bedded in. That was pragmatic. But its success, and now this ruling confirming its finality, it reinforces a wider governmental push towards, let's say, more streamlined and conclusive dispute resolution mechanisms.
Encouraging people to settle rather than litigate endlessly.
Exactly. It encourages voluntary compliance by offering these structured exits from long, costly litigation. That frees up judicial resources, sure, but it also creates a more predictable tax environment for businesses and individuals.
So less uncertainty.
Right. It's a kind of pragmatic recognition that sometimes, clearing the past effectively is essential for building a more efficient and maybe even fairer system for the future.
And that wraps up our deep dive today.
Yeah.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. From India's incredible leap in the global SDG rankings
to revisiting those really impactful lessons from the emergency era.
Yeah. Then exploring modern electoral reforms in Bihar, delving into medical breakthroughs like the hemophilia test kit and those public health challenges like Candida tropicalis.
And we touched on global diplomacy with the OIC, grassroots governance through the TOTI program, and innovative climate solutions like enhanced rock weathering, alongside those stark WMO climate warnings for Asia.
Plus the enduring legacy of Sri Narayana Guru, and finally, that tax dispute resolution scheme.
What's truly fascinating, I think, is seeing how these seemingly disparate topics, sustainability, history, health, governance, climate, are actually quite interconnected.
They really are. Understanding one sheds light on another.
Exactly. It offers a richer, more nuanced understanding of the world around us. Knowledge is most valuable when it's understood, connected, and maybe even applied. We hope this deep dive has given you some unique insights, maybe a few surprising facts that stick with you.
So thinking about all this global challenge,